Well, I think we covered a lot of waterfront here. I don't know if everyone is as emotionally drained and intellectually drained as I am, but I think it's a testimony to the fact that people are developing together a sense of what the problems are, how we can solve them, and really talking very honestly here. And I guess from my point of view, I see a lot of different groups struggling very similarly. And the question is, we have this meeting, but it seems like there's a lot of things that maybe we could try and think about organizing to help each other, throughout the year. I'm struck by, the presentation about developing outcomes for the creatine mutation. And I was just at Angelman's Foundation. They very similar issues with their kids, and they're doing the same thing. Uh, so I wonder whether we're not all in the same boats. We're all kind of going the same place, and some of us in the same boat. So I'm just wondering whether we could organize something for when people have projects, might be able to float them out there and see if anybody else wants to jump on the project with them, either to learn or to contribute. Uh, I guess the I think the take home points for me are that um, as a group, we have really strong leaders. People are really passionate about what they're doing, and and I think there's a good feeling and vibe among the groups. Um, Gets back to the issue of silos. So the what we're all trying to do to get to that goal is we have to work through all these bunch of different silos. We have this ecosystem which we see and haven't been represented here very much. The people who are in the laboratories working on the mechanism of diseases and trying to figure out if this target's going to work or that target. So way to the left, you have the investigators who are toiling away, and they could benefit a lot from the interactions with these groups because, as we said in the beginning, you know, what really motivates people is that sense of they're being able to contribute to a bigger effort, and the effort is all focused on the people who have the disorders or the caregivers or the people taking care of the folks with disorders. So I think even bridging those silos would be really important, and maybe something we could think about doing. A lot of those things are probably done better locally than they are, because it's not really one group that represents all the scientists, uh, but I would say that each of the groups could consider in their local environments, who are the folks you call, and you all have scientific advisory boards, and they would have contacts to the people who are, sitting at the bench. And again, capturing people in the earliest stages of their careers is something that you should not underestimate your power to do that. Um, and I think we learned, I think today that we, as a group can feel good about sharing ideas in this kind of safe space that we created with the nonprofit forum. We're not all talking about the same thing, but I think we all kind of understand where each other is coming from. And I think everyone, I thought the vibe was that we were really inclusive of everyone's ideas. Sometimes they mesh with ours, sometimes they were a little bit different. Everybody has a little bit of a different flavor in what they're trying to do. Uh, and the the ecosystem, we have pieces here. We didn't we the other parts of the ecosystem are the actual professionals who are taking care of the patients, the caregivers. Um, that would be another group to consider bringing in the future. Um, when I was coming out, the people who took care of the patients were the same people who did the research. That's not exactly what happens now anymore because the clinical research become so sophisticated that it almost is a career in and of itself. And and so to try and understand, when you're talking about outcome measures, what are the statisticians thinking? Because really, it's the statisticians that are the drivers of what outcome measure is going to be used in any kind of a trial. Um, and so those groups, which we don't usually think about so much, are also, worth thinking about including as we go forward. Uh, we talked about particularly, how we work through to develop therapies, and I think pretty clear that the FDA is really on our side in all these endeavors, and certainly I could say from the NANDS side, we've had just tremendous relationships with the FDA over the last couple of years, and I think we can also, our program directors, when you're working in that space where you're trying to get ready to the FDA, our program directors could probably offer advice to help you with that as well. Suma Babu talked a little bit about that, end zone of trying to get the healthcare systems involved, and in the development of actual pathways for people with ALS to, get the best care, also get involved in research. That's a whole nother area which is, driven by priorities that are somewhat shared with us, but sometimes are not, particularly on the financial side. And I think we are seeing, and you're probably going to be seeing as well for many of the rare diseases, that as we develop these therapies, unless the costs come down, we're going to have real trouble getting them out to patients. And if that becomes a problem, we're going to have real trouble getting any companies interested in actually working to bring them to the FDA. So I think that's something we got to think about. There's a really interesting article that came out in Nature, I think it was just this week or last week, about how to make these genomic therapies less expensive. And I think the take-home point is that the current system we have now for commercialization is not going to work. We have to build a different kind of system, and that system, actually the node of that system may have to be nonprofits, where they take over this ability to take the INDs, work with folks to manufacture and distribute these gene therapies, particularly in the rare diseases where the company is not going to be able to make enough money for profit. So very kind of really, I think the genomic therapies get us into a completely different space that we haven't been before. And certainly for the rare diseases, this paper really points out the fact that we might need to develop a whole new infrastructure that would affect, what we do early on, but also keep our minds on what happens if we're successful, how we're going to get that gene therapy out there. People may know there's some gene therapies that are life-saving that the companies decided they couldn't make any money, and they basically stopped making them available. So those kind of things have happened already. So I'd urge people to think about that going forward. But I think, just so impressed with the thought and actually the emotion that went into a lot of the talks over today and yesterday. So I think we're in a really good place moving forward. And I think that to think about how we can come together more, I think is probably the take-home message here. Because I think working together, we're going to be so much more effective than each of us working on our own pathway. And NINDS is kind of in this space where we can see all the partners, and we certainly do that with some of the groups, convene groups that have all parts of the ecosystem. We're still doing it on a one-off basis, and it's a scaling up, I think, which is ask people to think about how we can do that better. But NIS is really invested in moving forward with your agendas, certainly on the treatment sides. And I think all of our staff found this to be, again, a meeting that was even better than last year's meeting. So word to the new steering committee, once again, you're going to have a tough challenge in making the next year's meeting better, and maybe we have to do something in between. So thanks very much. Happy to hang around and answer any questions that people have. Questions?
So I have a question. Yeah. We still want to, should I get the microphone?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So there's an interesting aspect of cross-cutting between NINDS, and so there's the Health Research Alliance, there's National Health Council, which are very broad. NIH is very broad. I'm just curious if you, like, I come here and I connect with people and I see these opportunities. I've done some other things sort of separately with groups that are the same structure and whatnot. Is there a thing that we can do that's an ongoing thing that is both cross-cutting this way and neurologically focused? Because there is more value, or a lot of value, in getting the groups that are all working on the brain together. Everybody's working on patient engagement, and everybody's working on these trainings and whatnot. So I'd love to figure out something that's complementary to those two other organizations that takes advantage of the juice of this meeting. So
Yeah.
I
No,
agree.
I mean, I have the same feeling in my head. So I think I think if people can think about how we might work. I mean, we want to make it, anything we do, we want to make it useful. So you don't want to do it for the sake of doing it, but you want to do it if there's a goal that we can, establish, shoot for, then go to the next goal. But I think there's, I can see that there's clearly issues that might be pursued better as a group. And the question is how to do it.
It's got a call on Penny, but she stood up.
I really appreciate your suggestion, and I think as well that, like, what is unique about this space, right? Instead, we're focused on the brain in one way or another, and so there's aspects of diving into that I think will help make sure that it is useful. And it's because for example, there's a rare disease group that the RDCRN is running, right, with lots of different advice for advocacy groups. There's the HRA, there's the National Health Council. But I do think there's certain things that's happening in the neurology space, or opportunities that we're all sharing similar challenges, whether that's biomarker development and how we all respond to neurofilament, or my points earlier about how might we accelerate tool development across neurology spaces, but also with outcome measures that are neurology specific. I think they're a little bit different than something like motor that you can physically measure in the same way as what is cognition, right? Like you could have whole multi-day meetings on just that one fact, and yet we're all struggling with how we measure it in a effective way. So I don't think that's really helpful, but that's my 2 cents, that I think we do, if we gather more frequently, it would really need to be narrowed in on something and make it around the value that we all are seeking in the space. Because I think that's a challenge too, that every single one of us in this room is probably not getting a right work-life balance as it is. So let's make sure that it's really, really honed. Does that make sense?
So, yeah. And do you think we could attack some of these things, on Zoom meetings and, topic related Zoom meetings?
Yeah. What do you think, Laura?
I think that is entirely possible. I just want to add that I had the great opportunity to be at the National Academy last November and hosted a panel discussion on people with lived experience with devices. We had people from Parkinson's community, we had people from major depression, and of course the epilepsy community. And what has evolved from that is something called an action collaborative. And the academy continues to be involved and bring people together to talk about what can we make actionable out of that panel and out of that entire meeting. So maybe that's a model to look at for this community, to think about how do we all need whatever it is we do to be actionable. We don't really want to sit in another meeting and just talk.
Right.
But maybe that's something that we could explore as to how do they execute that and what are the outcomes, just as a model system in case, it could be applied here. Just a thought.
So the Action Collaboratory is related to the devices, or it's
It
separate
is,
issue?
it was a
was-
collaborative that came out of that particular discussion that continues to keep those people together and talk. One of the big issues that we were talking about was implementation. We've got technologies and yet they're not getting to the patient.
Big tough problem.
So how do we, that group was taking on that charge of talking about this and trying to figure out mechanisms to make it happen. The same philosophy, same model system could be used for whatever this group comes up with. And I agree. I mean, there are biomarkers that are out there that the epilepsy community is just learning about, but other groups have been using. So where can we, perhaps it's just worth having a discussion, taking a look at what an action collaborative could look like based on what's happening at the academy.
Good.
Okay.
Well, good. Why don't we all think, and so we'll send emails around and see
And
what
do
we come up with.
something.
Yeah, it's got to be doing something.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, and enjoy your trip back. Hopefully, no troubles with the airlines or the computers. All right. Take care now.